countdown, we have the single olive. Victor Feguer was convicted of kidnapping a doctor in an attempt to learn how to make drugs. But that went badly, and when the doctor refused to help him, he took his life and dumped his body. In 1963, he was charged with kidnapping, robbery, and murder. For his last meal, he requested a single olive. Yes, just one olive. And the reasoning behind it is actually quite interesting. Basically, he ate the olive and then put the pit in his pocket. His hope was that when he was buried, the pit would grow an olive tree over his grave, and it would symbolize peace. So there was logic behind his weird last meal request. Coming in at number 9, we have Ronnie Lee Gardner. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. In 1985, Ronnie Lee Gardner attempted to escape from a courthouse and ended up killing a man during his escape. He was then given the death penalty. His last request was pretty interesting. He ordered steak, a lobster tail, a 7-Up, and apple pie with vanilla ice cream. But that's not all. He asked to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy while he ate his meal. Now, I don't know about you, but this is super clever. Like, he picked one of the longest movie series out there. What a great way to stall your execution. Hopefully he asked for the director's cut, and one with like added commentary as well. In our 8th spot, we have Velma Barfield. Velma Barfield was an American serial killer who was convicted in 1978. She's also known as the first woman in the US to be executed after the 1976 reinstatement of the death penalty. This also granted her the name Death Row Granny. For her last meal, she requested a bag of cheese doodles and a can of Coca-Cola, something a teenager would ask his mom to have. Only one bag of cheese doodles though? Like, I would have asked for several and then eat it really slowly. In our 7th spot, we have William Bonin. In 1996, William Bonin, also known as the Freeway Killer, ordered lots to eat and drink for his last meal. He ordered 2 pepperoni and sausage pizzas and 3 servings of chocolate ice cream for dessert. What did he have to drink? Well, 3 6-packs of Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Yeah, he ordered 18 cans of soda. He must have been really thirsty. I'm just curious to know if he drank it all and why he ordered so much. Moving on to number 6, we have Bobby Wayne Woods. In 1998, Bobby Wayne Woods was convicted of kidnapping and murder. For his last meal, he wasn't shy at all. He ordered a bunch of everything. Get ready, guys. It's a long list. So he ordered 2 chicken fried steaks, 2 fried chicken breasts, 3 pork chops, yes, 3, 2 burgers, 4 slices of bread, a half pound of fried potatoes, a half pound of onion rings, chocolate cake, and 2 pitchers of milk. I don't know if he ate it all or what, but that is a hefty meal. But honestly, that's the way to do it. Like, don't be concerned about calories. Just gorge yourself. You're about to die anyways. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with The Secret. In 2003, a man named Larry Bill Elliott was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of Dana Thrall and Robert Finch. It all started when a woman named Rebecca Gregg posted an ad online looking for a sugar daddy. For 18 months, Larry was her sugar daddy, sending her money and such. However, things went wrong when Larry found out Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, Robert, was still in love with her. Larry, being jealous, said he would take care of it, so he killed Robert and Dana, who lived with him. Here's the thing. We don't know what Larry requested for his last meal because he asked for it to remain a secret and to never be revealed. That is so mysterious and makes me want to know what it is. Like, we're not gonna make fun if it was like a McDonald's Happy Meal or something. Hell, those are delicious. In our 4th spot, we have Jolly Ranchers. On June 4th, 1985, Gerald Lee Mitchell abducted 2 men who were attempting to buy marijuana. He then took the 2 out to a vacant house where he robbed them before shooting them both. The same day, he shot another man. He was charged with homicide, and he got the death penalty. Before being executed in 2011, he requested an assorted bag of Jolly Ranchers. Yeah, he didn't want a full meal, he just wanted a bag of candy. I mean, Jolly Ranchers are pretty good. The green and the blue ones, oh my gosh, they're so good. What's your favorite candy? Let me know in the comments below. Moving on to number 3, we have SpaghettiOs. On December 24th, 1994, Thomas Grasso broke into an elderly woman's home and strangled her with her own Christmas tree lights. He then proceeded to rob her. He did the same to an elderly man 6 months later. In 1995, when he was set to be executed, he asked for a bunch of things. Here we go, guys. It's a long list. He requested 24 steamed mussels, 24 steamed clams, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, 6 BBQ spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half of a pumpkin pie with whipped cream, diced strawberries, and SpaghettiOs. But he didn't get his SpaghettiOs. Instead, he was given room temperature spaghetti in a can, and he was mad about this. In his final statement, he said, and I quote, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got canned spaghetti. I want the press to know this." In our second spot, we have the hefty order. In 1996, grocery store butcher Gary Carl Simon was convicted of a very heinous crime. For his last meal in 2012, he ordered way more than he could eat. This one is the longest order on this list, so here we go. He ordered 1 Pizza Hut Supreme deep dish pizza with double mushrooms, double onions, double jalapeno peppers, and double pepperoni. He then ordered a second pizza with 3 cheeses, olives, bell peppers, tomatoes, garlic, and Italian sausage. He then ordered 5 pounds of Parmesan cheese and 10 cups of ranch dressing, 8 ounces of jalapeno nacho cheese, 4 ounces of sliced jalapenos, 2 20-ounce cherry cokes, 2 large strawberry shakes, 2 pints of strawberry ice cream, and 1 family-size bag of Doritos. If he ate all of that, the total amount of calories would be 29,000. Of course, he didn't finish the meal, but it said that he ate about half of it. I'm just curious what he did with all that Parmesan cheese and ranch. Like, he didn't order a salad, so did he just eat spoonfuls of the cheese and then quench his thirst with the ranch dressing, or what? And in our number 1 spot, we have a lump of dirt. Yes, someone actually wanted a lump of dirt as their last meal. The man's name was James Edward Smith. In 1983, he was charged with robbery and murder. Apparently, he wanted the dirt so he could perform a voodoo ritual before his execution. That's what he told the prison guards. He was going to use the dirt to mark his body so that his spirit would move on and not become a ghost. He was obviously denied this request. Hey, at least he wasn't planning on eating the dirt. So yeah, he didn't get the dirt, but he did get yogurt instead. Not quite the same, but he was apparently satisfied with just getting the yogurt.
Starting us off at number 10, we have Victor Feguer. So, a little backstory about what landed this man on death row. In the summer of 1960, Victor arrived in Dubuque, Iowa, and rented a room at a boarding house. But soon after he arrived, he began calling physicians from the Yellow Pages until he got a hold of Dr. Edward Bartles. Claiming a woman needed immediate medical attention, the doctor rushed to the location, but when he arrived, Victor kidnapped the doctor and drove across state lines to Illinois before killing him and fleeing. A few days later, he was arrested after trying to sell the late doctor's car, and eventually Feguer was tried and convicted in federal court for these crimes and sentenced to death. He tried to appeal his sentence, but on 2 occasions was denied. So on his final day, March 15, 1963, prior to his hanging, Victor was offered a last meal. His request, however, was incredibly strange. All he asked for was a single olive with a pit, explaining that he hoped a tree symbolizing peace would sprout from his grave. Instead, officials found the olive pit in his suit pocket during burial. Moving on to number 9, Troy Davis. In August of 1989, after a series of alcohol-infused decisions, Troy Davis wound up at a Burger King with some friends. However, once they arrived, one of his friends began fighting with a homeless man over some booze, and it quickly escalated into a violent fight between the 2 men. At this moment, the security guard noticed the fight and began to walk over. But what these men were unaware of was that the security guard at the Burger King was actually an off-duty police officer. When he tried to intervene and get the men to cut it out, Davis allegedly pulled out his weapon and shot him dead. After a few days of hiding from authorities, Davis eventually came forward and turned himself in for the crime. However, during his trial, he later pleaded not guilty, saying it was not him but his friend who had pulled the trigger. The trial was long and complicated, but eventually he was sentenced to death, a verdict he tried to appeal many times. Finally, in 2011, after multiple rescheduling, protests, and denied appeals, his final day arrived, and for his last meal, he requested nothing, insisting that the meal would not be his last. Next up at number 8, Gary Carl Simmons Jr. In August of 1966, Simmons and his accomplice Timothy Milano were confronted by Wolf and his girlfriend, who showed up at their house asking for a debt to be repaid to them. However, unable to pay, a fight broke out and Milano shot Wolf before Simmons committed SA on the girlfriend and shoved her in a closet. From there, he began to dismember the body, but thankfully the girlfriend managed to escape and ran to a neighbor's house to call the police. By 1997, Simmons was sentenced to death for what he had done. When his last day came in 2012, he requested 1 Pizza Hut Supreme deep dish pizza with double mushrooms, double onions, double jalapeno peppers, and double pepperoni, a second pizza with 3 cheeses, olives, bell peppers, tomatoes, garlic, and Italian sausage, 8 10-ounce packs each of Parmesan cheese and ranch dressing, 8 ounces of jalapeno nacho cheese, 4 ounces of sliced jalapenos, 2 20-ounce cherry cokes, 2 large strawberry shakes, 2 pints of strawberry ice cream, and finally 1 family-sized bag of Doritos nacho cheese flavor. All in all, it came to 29,000 calories. Moving on to number 7, Odell Barnes. In November of 1989, Odell Barnes broke into the home of Helen Bass while she was at work. However, when she arrived back at home, Barnes attacked and killed her before fleeing the scene. His trial was a circus of forensic evidence, human rights groups, and anti-death penalty protests. And following his conviction, an enormous amount of the public were calling for a life sentence instead. But the actions failed. Eventually, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. Barnes firmly held his innocence in the crime right up until the morning of his execution, and when asked what he would like for a last meal, he strangely requested justice, equality, and world peace. If only that was something they could have provided. Next up at number 6, Ted Bundy. The notorious and downright evil killer who needs no introduction, Ted Bundy is of course one of the most infamous criminals of all time. Convicted of killing and committing other horrors to at least 30 women, Bundy had one of the most notorious trials in history that ultimately ended in him being sentenced to death for the outrageous atrocities he committed. However, despite his usual flair for the dramatic, when his final day came, he declined a meal. As a result, he was given the default last meal: steak, eggs, hash browns, a piece of toast with butter and jam, juice, and coffee. But for whatever reason, didn't eat a bite and was executed later that morning. Moving on to number 5, Robert Anthony Madden. Having been convicted in September of 1985 for the death of Herbert Elber Megason and his son Don Gary Lynn Megason, Madden never once wavered on his innocence. Having been a cook prior to his death sentence for the crimes he denied committing, unlike many of the others on this list, Robert Anthony Madden actually had a very selfless last request. In May 1997, instead of requesting a last meal for himself, he requested that his last meal be donated to a homeless person. But sadly, his request was denied. His last statement was, "I apologize for your loss and your pain, but I didn't kill those people. Hopefully we will all learn something about ourselves and each other, and we will learn to stop the cycle of hate and vengeance and come to value what is really going on in this world." So I guess what's scary about this man is just the fact that an innocent man could likely have been killed for a crime he didn't commit. Moving on to number 4, Thomas J. Grasso. Convicted for taking the life of 87-year-old Hilda Johnson, whom he strangled with her own Christmas lights, as well as the 81-year-old Leslie Holtz, whose social security checks he stole after the deed. Shockingly, only 2 weeks after being arrested, Thomas J. Grasso confessed everything to the police, and by September of 1992, he was sentenced to death. Now, as far as last meals go, Grasso's was extravagant, having requested 24 steamed mussels, 24 steamed clams, a Burger King double cheeseburger, half a dozen barbecue spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, half a pumpkin pie with whipped cream and chopped strawberries, and a 16-ounce can of SpaghettiOs, all served at room temperature. However, it was his final words about his last meal that really stood out. Less than an hour before he died, he issued his 4th and final statement, saying, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Moving on to number 3, Ricky Ray Rector. In March of 1981, Rector and a group of friends visited a local nightclub, but after one of his friends was denied entry for not being able to pay cover, Rector pulled out his weapon and killed the guard almost instantly. Following this, he and his friends fled the scene, and Rector spent the next few days hiding with friends and family until his sister convinced him to turn himself in. He agreed on the condition that his childhood friend be the cop that comes by the house. However, when the officer arrived, Rector did not confess as promised, but shot and killed him before running out into the backyard and attempting to take his own life as well. While the shot destroyed his frontal lobe, he actually survived and still faced trial for his crimes. There was a lot of controversy surrounding his sentence, as some felt he shouldn't have been fit for trial, but ultimately he was sentenced to death for what he had done. Now, compared to some others on this list, his last meal request was normal enough: steak, chicken, cherry flavored Kool-Aid, and a full pecan pie. However, the eerie part is that Rector left the pie behind and joked with the guard that he was saving it for later. Moving on to number 2, James Edward Smith. Born October 19, 1952 in Kentucky, prior to his run-in with the law, James worked as a tarot card dealer in New Orleans and later a taxi driver in Houston, Texas. However, in March of 1983, Smith was involved in a robbery that ultimately resulted in him killing a clerk before attempting to evade the authorities. But soon after leaving the building, he was caught and charged for his crime. However, strangely, when his sentence was upheld by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 1987, Smith waived his appeals in an attempt to speed up his execution. Initially, he was set to be executed in 1988, and so the day before, Smith requested a last meal of dirt. But as this request did not fall under the prison's list of approved foods, he was denied. But it gets more interesting from here. According to Texas A&M University soil experts, the dirt was believed to be eaten in voodoo rituals, which Smith practiced and believed in. And so it has been suggested that Smith had hoped to perform a voodoo ritual that he believed would assist in his reincarnation. However, he was not actually executed as scheduled in 1988, as in the morning his mother's attorney asked for an appeal, claiming he was incompetent. Fast forward to 1990 and he was scheduled again, refusing his appeals despite that his mother had once again tried to get the court to appeal the sentence. Finally, as he had tried to request 2 years prior, he asked for dirt, but was again denied his request and brought yogurt instead. And last up in our number 1 spot, Lawrence Russell Brewer. In 1998, Lawrence, along with 2 other men, Sean Berry and John King, was responsible for the disgusting homicide of James Byrd Jr. In short, Lawrence and his pals were proclaimed white supremacists, and Byrd, a black man, was tragically the victim of their vile and hate-fueled crime. Lawrence, along with King, was sentenced to death and maintained he had no regrets for his actions, claiming he would even do it again if he could. However, it's not just his evil actions that made him well known, it was also his last meal request. having requested a massive helping of food including 2 chicken fried steaks and sliced onions dripping in gravy, a triple meat bacon cheeseburger with everything on the side, 1 cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos, a big bowl of fried okra with ketchup, 1 pound of barbecued meat, and half a loaf of white bread, 3 fajitas with all the toppings, a Pizza Hut meat lovers pizza, a pint of Bluebell vanilla ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts on top, and 3 root beers. But when the food arrived, Brewer refused to eat, saying he wasn't hungry, which ultimately resulted in Texas terminating last meals for inmates.
Alright, so starting off our list, in at number 10 we have Ted Bundy's last meal request. Alright, so what did this notorious serial killer request for his final meal? Absolutely nothing. Is this real life right now? You have the opportunity to satisfy every taste bud in your mouth and you choose to eat nothing. I would be taking full advantage of this privilege if it was me, but nope, Ted Bundy refused to make a last meal request, so he was given the standard final meal, which was a medium rare steak, eggs over easy, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk and juice. But actually he refused to eat that too. I think the worst thing about being executed, not that I have any experience, but is being executed with an empty stomach.
Alright guys, moving on to number 9, we have Victor Feguer. Victor was the last federal inmate to be executed in the United States prior to the moratorium on the death penalty, thanks to Furman versus Georgia. He's also the last person to be put to death in the state of Iowa. So, what got him the death penalty? He had randomly searched up doctors in the phone book, calling them alphabetically until he got one. He stumbled upon Dr. Edward Bartels. He told Bartels that he was with a woman who was ill and needed immediate treatment. But when Bartels arrived at the room that Victor was renting, Victor kidnapped him and then killed him with a single to the head, leaving his body in a cornfield. So, what was 28-year-old Victor's last meal request? Definitely was not corn. It was a single olive with the pit in it. Why? Well, he allegedly told guards that he hoped an olive tree would sprout from his grave as a sign of peace. After he was pronounced dead, authorities later found the olive pit in one of his suit pockets.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi slurps their way into number 8. William Bonin was found guilty of a and killing at least 21 people, but that number could have been even higher. He spent 14 years on death row before he was executed by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison back in 1996. But before his execution, he made one final request. He wanted 2 large pizzas, 3 pints of ice cream, and 3 6-packs of Coke and Pepsi. I'm not sure why he wants to mix the two, maybe he's doing the Pepsi challenge. I guess he wanted to settle the Coke versus Pepsi debate once and for all. I mean, if the lethal injection didn't kill him, the super high sugar content of his meal probably would have.
Next up at number 7 now we have Stephen Anderson. He was an American murderer who worked as a contract killer in Las Vegas in the 1970s. He was arrested and sentenced to death for the killing of 81-year-old Elizabeth Lyman, whose house he was robbing. He covered her body with a blanket and then made himself a meal in her kitchen. A suspicious neighbor called the sheriff's department, and while he was eating and watching TV, deputies responded to the call and arrested him. He was on death row for over 20 years before being killed by lethal injection in 2002. For his last meal, Anderson requested 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, a pint of cottage cheese, a hominy corn mixture, peach pie, chocolate chip ice cream, and radishes. Next up at number 6 now we have Sacco and Vanzetti. These 2 men stand out on our list as actually being wrongly convicted of murder. They were sentenced to death for the murders of a guard and paymaster in 1920 during an armed robbery of a shoe company in Massachusetts. They were executed by electric chair on August 23, 1927. 50 years later, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis issued a proclamation that they had been unfairly tried and convicted. For their last meals, the 2 men requested soup, tea, meat, and toast. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Stephen Woods. He was an American murderer who was sentenced to death for the killings of Bethina Bross and drug dealer Ronald Whitehead. While on death row, he drew media attention by petitioning for prisoners' rights and was a huge part of a hunger strike to oppose death row inmates' treatment. He was executed on September 13, 2011 by lethal injection. For his last meal, he requested 2 pounds of bacon, a large 4-meat pizza, 4 fried chicken breasts, 2 Mountain Dew drinks, some root beer, some sweet tea, 2 pints of ice cream, 5 chicken fried steaks, 2 hamburgers with bacon, fries, and 12 garlic breadsticks with marinara on the side. I couldn't find anything that said he finished all of that food. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Ronnie Lee Gardner. This Utah murderer killed Melvin John Otterstrom during a robbery in Salt Lake City in 1985. While being taken to a court hearing, he and killed Michael Burdell in an unsuccessful escape attempt. For that murder, he was handed the death penalty. His case got a lot of media attention because Gardner requested death by firing squad, the first one of its kind in 14 years. For his last meal, he asked for steak, a lobster tail, apple pie, vanilla ice cream, and to eat it all while watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And finally, at the number 1 spot now, we have Ronnie Threadgill. This American murderer shot and killed Dexter McDonald while robbing his car in Texas on April 14, 2001. He was on death row until 2013 when he was executed by lethal injection. For his last meal, he requested baked chicken, mashed potatoes with country gravy, vegetables, sweet peas, bread, tea, water, and punch. However, Texas actually abolished the right to have a last meal by then, so Threadgill was given the same meal as everyone else. With James Edward Smith. He was sentenced to death in Texas for murdering someone during a robbery in Houston. He was executed on June 5th, 1990. Before his death, he was asked what he wanted his last meal to be. He replied, dirt. Just plain old dirt from the ground outside. He explained that he wanted it for a voodoo ritual. He wanted to use the dirt to mark his body so that his spirit would move on to the afterlife and not just become a ghost. The prisoner said that dirt was not on their list of acceptable food requests and asked him again what he wanted for his last meal. He chose yogurt. Yeah, I think that one was just to eat though, not for a different voodoo ritual. At number 9 now we have Victor Feguer. This man from Michigan was convicted of murder in 1963 and was executed by hanging in Iowa State Penitentiary. He was the last person to be executed in that state. For his last meal, he requested one single olive with the pit still inside. Nothing else. He hoped that when he died, it would grow into an olive tree from inside his body as a sign of peace. After he was hanged, the authorities found the pit in one of his suit pockets. Did he forget to swallow it, or was it just some sort of strange lie? At number 8 now, we have Velma Barfield. This woman from South Carolina was an American serial killer who killed 7 people from 1971 to 1978. Now, she was executed in 1984 at the Central Prison, North Carolina. She chose as her last meal a bag of cheese doodles and a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola. People found it quite strange because normally prisoners can request pretty much anything, including steaks, lobsters, any kind of expensive food. Would you guys choose cheese doodles and Coke? Maybe that's someone's favourite meal. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Eileen Wuornos. This woman was an American serial killer from Michigan. She murdered 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. After being sentenced to death, she turned down all of her chances of appealing and simply said, I killed those men and I'd do it again too. I have hate crawling through my system. She was offered a last meal but declined and instead just chose a cup of black coffee. Her last words were, yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big ship and all, I'll be back, I'll be back. At number 6 now we have Thomas J. Grasso. This man from Oklahoma strangled an 87-year-old woman on Christmas Eve 1990. He then stole some small change and her TV. 6 months later he killed an 81-year-old man and stole his security check. He was executed on March 20th, 1995. Before his death, he released a number of strange press statements, including a poem he wrote called A Visit with Mystery. The first few lines of that read, ready, willing and waiting am I asked for death but could not die. Each sunrise is one day less. I'll endure this horrible mess. Pretty intense, and it seemed to really contrast a lot with his last ever meal, which he requested to be a bowl of room temperature SpaghettiOs. Apparently the guards always served them too hot to him. At number 5 now we have Gary Carl Simmons. This man from Mississippi executed a butcher in 1996 and then used his meat carving knives to dismember him and scatter the body parts in alligator infested waters. He received a lethal injection in 2012. His last meal was shocking just because of its sheer size. Wait till you hear this. He ordered a Pizza Hut Supreme Dish pizza with double mushrooms, onions, jalapeno peppers and pepperoni, another pizza with 3 cheeses, olives, bell peppers, tomatoes, garlic and Italian sausage, 10 8-ounce packs of Parmesan cheese, 10 cups of ranch dressing, 8 ounces of jalapeno nacho cheese, 4 ounces of sliced jalapenos, 2 20-ounce cherry cokes, 2 large strawberry shakes, 2 pints of strawberry ice cream and a family-sized bag of Doritos nacho cheese flavor. That came to a whopping 29,000 calories. Kind of sounds like a death sentence in its own right. Next up at number 4 now we have Barton K. Kirkham. This man from Utah was sentenced to death in 1956 after the murder of 2 grocery store clerks during an armed robbery in Salt Lake City. He was actually the last person to be hanged in the state of Utah. His last meal request was for pizza and ice cream, telling the prison steward that you get cheese, meat and everything in one meal, not so much fuss. I think they were separate though and not together, but people seem to think that maybe they were together. Either way, his last words were, "I've asked God to forgive me." At number 3 now we have Ray Rector. In 1981, this man from Arkansas and killed a man in a restaurant and then a police officer who was negotiating his surrender, and then he tried to kill himself. He failed and was instead executed for his crimes in 1992. He requested steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid and pecan pie. The guards didn't find anything creepy until they came to get him for the execution. He had just left the pecan pie slice completely untouched and told them he was saving it for later. Was he just full? Was this some sort of dark joke? Maybe a threat? Pretty creepy either way.